Okay, now you should be able to hear the audio. So, Corey, it turns out that you have to turn on your microphone.
Thanks.
I know, right? Okay, so, all right, so sorry about that. So, Corey, what I was just sort of talking about was how I made the red material. So it already had the yellow material, but then I made sort of a clone of it and made it red so that we have a yellow for one player and red for the other, whatever. Okay, so that part was relatively easy. Okay, now, if we go back to the blueprint stuff, I really only ever edited the content in 3 blueprints: the puzzle block grid, and the puzzle game mode. Okay, I didn't have to create anything new in this case. Now, I could have created new stuff, but I just chose to use what was there. Okay, so the first thing I did was, okay, let me go here. Right, so they had already programmed this chunk there, right? What to do if a tile gets clicked, okay? And what should happen? Well, there's a variable set called isActive, and it's defaulted to 0. And when you click it, the first thing it's going to do is check, is that true or false? Okay, so isActive true or false? It's default false. Okay, if it's false, that means you haven't clicked it yet, and then do stuff. If it's true, that means it has been clicked. Well, once it's been clicked, there's nothing to do, right? In Tic Tac Toe, once you select a block, that's it. Okay, so if it's selected, change it to be active, okay, so that it can't get clicked again. And then this is where I made some changes, okay? In the game, or the template, what it did was when you clicked on it, it switched the material to the yellow material, okay? But in our case, what do we want to do? What do you mean eliminate it? So if I click a block, what do I want to happen? Right. Okay, so keep going. Elaborate. Oh, so that you know which one you had clicked. Okay, so we got to keep up with that. But X or O, right? Right now, if you click on any block, they turn yellow, which we'll call X. I want every other click to turn O. Right, okay, so what I did was I created, in the game mode, I created a variable called player turn. And in this case, because it's a 2-player game, I just used a Boolean, true, false. And I'm thinking of false, or 0, as being it's the first player's turn, and true, or 1, as being the second player's turn. Yes? Yes, because there are 9 puzzle blocks, but there's only one game mode. So, yeah, so the reason that I put the player turn variable in the game mode, I could have put it in the block grid instead of the game mode, but it's got to go somewhere. I didn't put it in the individual tile because there are 9 copies of it, and I don't need 9 copies of the turn variable. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, good. So how did I get access to the variable, the player turn variable, from the game mode? What do I have to do if I want to access variables from a different blueprint object? I have to cast to it, okay? So in this case, I'm casting to the game mode, and what game mode am I in? I need to take get game mode, pipe that into this cast, and then as puzzle game mode allows me to access variables that are inside the puzzle game mode. Okay, good? Okay, so I did these 3 blocks, right, or these 2 blocks here allow me to access that. And then the player's turn is either true or false. Okay, and the way, like I said, I'm thinking about it is false means it's player 1's turn, true means it's player 2's turn. okay? And so I did a branch. Well, what do I want to do? If it's player 1's turn and he clicks something, I want the blocks to change to one color, and otherwise I want them to change to another, okay? So all I did was I made a branch and sort of made a copy and paste of these two guys here, right? So I was thinking of yellow as being the first player and red as being the second, and if it's the yellow player's turn, when he clicks something, I want to change the material to the yellow. Well, it's called orange, but it looks more yellow, okay? Otherwise, I want to do it to the red, okay? So all that did was handle the color changing. Okay, and then we're not finished with this yet, but let's make sure we're good there. Okay, so question, preguntas, fragen up to this point. Okay? Good? All right, now, once the color gets set, what do I want to do? Okay, this, as it turned out, ended up not being all that important. Oh, yes, okay, sorry. Then the other thing. I'll get to this in a second. So I need to switch the color of the blocks. Okay, great. That's just visual, though. What else do I need to do to keep track in Tic Tac Toe? Yeah.
You got to make sure like that you keep track of the active blocks, because that's how you're going to check if player 1.
Yeah, you've got to check or keep track of which blocks have been clicked on by whom, okay, so that you can eventually determine whether or not somebody has won the game, okay? And so the way I chose to do that, and let me go out of this blueprint and into the game mode so I can show you what that looks like. Okay, so let me stop that. All right, let me close this, and I'm going to go to the puzzle game mode. Okay, so how did we keep track of this when we did it in MakeCode? Do you guys happen to remember? Yeah, we had the 9 different, we had a variable for each block, okay? And what we did was we said state 0 was that it had not been selected, state 1 was that the first player had selected it, and state 2 was that the second player had selected it, okay? And then we checked whether or not there were 3 in a row, right? And that part was a little complicated because there were a bunch of different logic cases. Okay, so what I did in Unreal Engine was rather than making a variable for each block, okay, I chose to make a single variable that would hold the information for all 9 blocks. Okay, the reason I did that was so that I wouldn't have to cast to 9 different blocks. And that just kept things a little cleaner, okay, whatever. All right, so the way I did this is, let me click this variable here, which I called block vals. Okay. Now, when you create a variable, what kind of numbers or data do we want to store for the blocks? Well, we were using basically a number. 0 to mean it hadn't been clicked yet, 1 to mean that it had been selected by the first player, and 2 for the second player. Okay? So each of those is an integer, right? How many such integers do I need to keep track of? 9, because there's 9 blocks. Yes? Okay, so rather than having 9 different variables, I had one variable that would have 9 numbers inside of it. This is called an array. Okay, and it's something that was in MakeCode, but I don't think we ever used it. Okay, or maybe some of you guys did in the in your projects. But okay, so what I did was I made it a numerical array. Okay, so let me show you how I did this. So here I've got the winner variable, right, which is also an integer. And you see up here variable type integer and then this little thing next to it. If I click that, then I get these options. I can have an array, I can have a set, and I can have a map. Okay, we won't worry about what sets and maps are, but I want an array. Okay, so I selected that, and then that turned my little sort of greenish thing to this grid of stuff okay? And, oops, let me double click there. There we go, okay. So it turned it into an array of integers rather than a single integer, okay? Now, arrays can have as many things in them as you want or as few things in them as you want. That's up to you. But in my game, I knew that I needed exactly 9 entries, okay? So I set the default value of the array when the game starts to have 9 entries, all of whom were 0. Okay, and I know this is maybe a little hard to see on the screen, but you see over here, block vals, I've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, these are the indices of it. Okay, so this is something about C++, which is what Unreal Engine is built on. What's the first entry in the array? Is it number 0 or number 1? It's number 0. Okay, so almost everything in C++ is 0 indexed, meaning the first thing is thing number 0, not thing number 1. Okay, and that's why my values here are 0 through 8 rather than 1 through 9. Okay, not really a big deal once you're used to it, but that's just this deal, right? So that's sort of C++ there. Okay, so the way I'm thinking about this is I'm thinking, like when we did this with MakeCode, I'm thinking of the blocks. The top left one is block 0, the next one's block 1, and so on. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Good. Now, initially, when the game starts, none of the blocks have been clicked, so I set all of their values to 0. Okay, and then when a block gets clicked, I need to set its value to either be a 1 or a 2. 1 if it was the first player that clicked it, 2 if the second player clicked it. Okay, there's nothing, by the way, special about the numbers 1 and 2. I could have used 17 and 39 for all I care, right? It just pick something that is not stupid. 17 and 39 would have been stupid. Fun fact, guess what my jersey number was when I played football in 7th grade? 39. Needless to say, I did not continue in 8th grade. Might have knocked a few screws loose. Anyway, okay, so that I needed to create the variable to keep track of all that, okay? So that we'd be able to determine who won or not. Okay, so let me close that. All I did there was create the variable. All right, now if I go back to the block, okay, sorry, let me do one other thing here. Where did I put this? Oh, okay, so let me open one other thing. Okay, so the other thing I did was I added a variable called block ID, okay, which made a variable inside each block for basically which number it is. 0 through 8 is the convention I used, okay? And then I used this at a few places just to kind of make things a little bit easier. Now, nowhere in here did I set what the block IDs were, okay? I let the grid, okay, so did you guys go into the puzzle grid and see what it was doing? The grid was an object that spawned 9 individual tiles. When you fired up the game, the grid said, oh, I need to spawn things, and it spawned 9 objects, right? Okay, so what I did, let me close this and go to the grid, okay, is, okay, you notice that there was a loop, okay? Why was there a loop? Because I wanted to repeat spawning a block 9 times, or however many times. Okay, so how many times is that loop going to run? Huh? Yeah, in our case, it'll run 9 times, 1 for each block, okay? And you see there's that size variable, which is defaulted to 3, right? If I change that to 4, it would make a 4 by 4 grid, but it's going to do 3 by 3 by default, which is, of course, what we want for Tic Tac Toe. Okay, so the thing with loops is you'll notice that there's 2 execution nodes that follow it. Okay, loop body, which is the thing, whatever you want to happen over and over again. Okay, and then what happens when the loop is completed would be something connected to the completed grid. Okay, after all 9 things are done. Now, in this particular case, once the loop was gone through, we didn't need to do anything else, so there's nothing connected to the completed grid. But there is to the loop body. Okay, so all this crap here is a bunch of math. Okay, forget that. Okay, and this stuff here is basically spawning the grids, but figuring out where they need to be put. Okay, the magic is right here, right? Spawn actor. Well, what kind of actor do we want to spawn? We want to spawn one of the tiles, right? Which is, in this case, it's a puzzle block. That was the name of the actor, or the type of the actor. Okay, good. Spawn transform, that thing in orange just puts it in the correct place in the world. Class is, well, what kind of object am I spawning? Well, it's a puzzle block. And then, because I added block ID as a variable, I can assign, when I spawn the thing, what its value of block ID is. Okay? I could also spawn, or when I spawn it, tell it who its owner is, or who its owner grid is, or other things. Okay, so I can initialize the variables for a particular instance of the block, and they might be different from one block to the next. Okay, now, this block ID, what kind of data is that? Right, so what's this sort of light greenish color? What does that represent as a data type? It's an integer, okay? Makes sense, right? Because I've got 9 blocks, I need to store the number 0 through 8, and then here's how I did that. Well, my loop index starts at 0, right? And it ends at 8. And so I just used the value of the loop index and piped that into the block ID. Then I didn't have to do any math or count or anything. It was all built in. Okay? So ponder that for a moment, because I'm seeing some funny looking faces. Okay, do we get the index part? Is that good? Yeah? Ethan, you're looking puzzled. Oh, 0 through 8? Oh, yeah, this line here, this guy there, goes all the way over to well, let me zoom out. See, this guy goes all the way over there to the block ID? Okay, so the indexing on the loop starts at 0. Then it does 1, 2, 3, all the way until it hits 8, which is the maximum in this case. Okay, and how do I know that that's the last index? Well, because what's my size? 3. Multiply 3 by 3, I get. Subtract 1 from that, I get, and that's the last index. Okay, so that's how I knew that this thing was happening 9 times, corresponding to counter numbers 0 through 8. Okay, and since, so I just recycled that counter variable to also then pipe into the block ID. Okay, then I didn't have to remake it or anything. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so now when all 9 blocks get created, they each have a different value of block ID, 0 through 8. Okay, and I'm thinking of the top left as being 0, and then the one to the right of that as being 1, and the one to the right of that as being 2, and then I go down to the next row and so on. Okay, so I think that's pretty similar to how we kept track of them in MakeCode, except I think in MakeCode I did 1 through 9 rather than 0 through 8, but kind of same difference, right? Good? Okay, so that's really the only change I made here, okay, to the block grid, was adding this block ID thing, okay? All right, now, if I go back to puzzle block, okay, so this was what happens when it gets clicked, right? So what did we do? We set the material, okay, and then there was all this crap that I had to do. Oops, sorry. Okay, so when I click on a block, what should happen? Change the material. Okay, good, did that. Then what? Huh? Right, it shouldn't go back to it, okay, and in this case, it only goes back to it if you tell it to go back to it. Once you set the material, it's set until you explicitly say otherwise. Okay, so that's good, we don't have to worry about that. One comment though, when you hover over with your mouse and then you hover off, the reason it's doing that is because when you hover over, it sets the material to white. When you hover off, it sets the material back to blue. Okay. Yeah. We need to check to see if we won, but just before that, we need to update the array that kept track of which tiles were what value. Okay. So where was that array stored? Where did I put it? I put it in the game mode. Yes? Okay. So if I want to get a variable out of the game mode, when I'm not in the game mode, what do I have to do? I have to cast to it. Okay, so I cast to the game mode so that I could get the block vals array out of that thing. Okay, and then I want to do stuff with that. Okay, so the blocks have block ID 0 through 8, right? And what are the indices of the array that's keeping track of everything? That was deliberate. Okay, because what it means is that I could say, if I click on a block and it's player 1's turn, if I'm block ID 7, which entry in the array do I need to update? Entry number 7, which is exactly the entry of my block ID. Okay, so what this does is it says, all right, take the block val, the array, that's the 9 numbers, and I want you to change item number that matches my block ID to the number 1. Okay, what does the number 1 represent for our game? Player 1 had clicked it. Okay, what about if it had been player 2's turn instead? Same thing, just change it to a 2. Okay, so do you guys see the parallel structure between the stuff at the top and the stuff at the bottom? They're all identical, except player 1 sets the value to a 1, player 2 sets it to a 2. Okay, so does that kind of make sense? Oui, uno. We be in? Okay, good. So our little array of 9 numbers, okay, they all start out as 0, and when you start clicking things, each time you click something, one of those zeros is going to get changed to either a 1 or a 2, depending on whose turn it was. Okay, good? Okay, and then that array of 9 numbers will be how we'll be able to tell whether or not somebody has won the game. Okay, good? All right, so now that we've updated the values of each thing, I need to check. I need to, whose turn is it? Each time I click, what should happen to the turns? They should flip-flop, okay? So what I did was, well, what kind of variable did I make the turn? What data type was that? It's a Boolean, okay, the red thing. And what's a Boolean? What does that mean again? True, false. Okay, I'm thinking of this as 0, 1. I could have done this with numbers, but since there's only 2 players, I just chose to use a Boolean. Okay, so if it's player 1's turn and they click, whose turn is it now? Player 2. Okay, so how do I make a Boolean flip-flop? I just negate it, okay, or do a logical not to it. Okay, so what this is doing is saying, okay, what is the current player turn? Is it a 0 or is it a 1? If it's a 0 and I not it, what does it become? And vice versa. Okay, so that's how I got the player turns to alternate, was just by each time you click, it negates the value of that variable. Okay, when I say negate, I mean logical negation, not numerical. So true becomes false, false becomes true, etc. Okay, good. That just made sure that the turns alternated. Okay, finally, what do I need to do? I need to check if we won, somebody won. Okay, make sense? Okay, so what I did was I created a function, and we'll go look at that function in a moment, called checkWin. Okay, and that function is inside, I chose to put it inside the puzzle game mode. Had to go somewhere. Okay, and that was a logical place to put it because did I need 9 copies of this function? No, I just needed one of them. So that's why I didn't put it in the grid. Okay. And so because this function is inside is inside the game mode, I have to cast to it. And then this right here is saying, hey, game mode, trigger the function checkWin, which will check if a player won. And we'll go look at what that function does in a minute. Okay, so good? So all that's what happened when you clicked on a thing. It changed the color, it updated the array of who had clicked where, it flipped the turn back to the other player, and finally, it told the game mode to check if somebody won. Okay, now why was it a good thing that I didn't check if anybody won until after a block had been clicked? Okay, the other maybe reason is, well, when else would I have done it? Okay, in MakeCode, for example, you had the on-game update stuff, and I could have done on-game update every 100 nanoseconds. Did I really need to check whether or not somebody had won that often? No, that would slow down your game. Okay, in this case, I only needed to check precisely once after each click. Make sense? Okay, so that keeps things from slowing down if you're running functions unnecessarily often. Okay, so that's all what happens when you click on something. Okay, so now what we need to go look at is this checkWin function and see how it works. Okay, good? Corey, you doing okay, man? All right, so let me close that. Let's go to the game mode. Okay. Now.
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. So, functions you can create. Okay, so I created a function called checkWin. So I just hit the plus, I type checkWin. Now the nice thing about functions is they give you your own, each function has its own little blank slate worth of blueprint. Okay, so this is one way that you can keep things sort of tidy and separated. Functions get their own little space. Okay, now so what you could think of is that the event graph and the construction script are really 2 functions, just ones that we use all the time. Okay. Okay, now this particular function is a little bit nasty because how do I tell whether or not somebody's won? How many different ways are there for a player to win? Yeah, it's either 16 or 8, depending on how we count, right? Okay, there are 8 different rows, 3 columns, and 2 diagonals, okay? And then it could have either been player 1 for all of those or player 2 for all of those, okay? So 8 different geometric configurations, 16 possibilities. So I'm going to go with the 8 because it'll actually be easier to keep track of it than, because 8 is smaller than 16 last time I checked, okay? All right, so here's how I did this. I've got the first row, I've got the second row, I've got the third row, I've got the first, second, and third column, and I've got the 2 diagonals, okay? And I need to check each different case, okay? All right, well, yes, oh my, indeed. Okay, so let's just concentrate on one of these, because really the rest of them are all copy-paste, okay? How do I check whether or not the first row is, there's a player that is 1? Okay, well, what do I need to check? Look in my array, and which entries in the array do I need to look at for the top row? Items number 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so what I've got here, let me zoom in a little bit more. Block vowels is just reading that array. And then I want to get specific entries out of it. Which entries do I want? Number 0, number 1, and number 2. Okay, so each one of those get blocks gets a specific entry out of the array. Okay, good? Okay, so now I have 3 numbers in my hand. Entry number 0, entry number 1, entry number 2. What do I need to check? They're equal to each other, okay? All right, so the way I do this is I check, is the first equal to the second, true or false? Is the second equal to the third, true or false? And then I want both of those things to be true. Okay, so I put an and pin. Okay. Do I ever have to check that the first is equal to the third? Why did I get away with not having to do it? Yeah, because logic, because math, right? If the first equals the second and the second equals the third, then logically the first also equals the third, so I don't have to check that separately. Okay, makes sense. Okay, so coming off of that and block is going to be a true or false value. It'll be false if all 3 blocks aren't the same value, and true if they are all the same value. Now, how many different values could they be all the same? Okay, yeah. So how many ways are there for the top 3 blocks to have the same values? Okay, actually it's 3. Okay, because when the game starts, what are all of them? They're all 0. Okay, do we care about that case? No, because nobody's won yet. Right? That's not possible. Okay, so 1 and 2 are the ones that we actually care about. Okay, so then the other thing I did was to say, by the way, is one of them 0? Or sorry, one of them is not 0? If one of them's not 0, and I pipe this to an and, then the only way that this block is true is if all 3 are the same number and none of them are 0. Okay, is that okay? Yeah. Bingo. Good question. Yes, the exclamation point, okay, so exclamation point equals means not equals. Okay, that's a pretty standard symbol in C++ and pretty much every computer language I've encountered, well, except Python. In Python, you literally just type the word not, which is kind of nice. Okay, so what did I make here? So let me just make this block, this guy right here. I made a not equals block, okay? And then you'll notice that I've got a whole bunch of different types of not equals block. Which one did I want? I wanted the one that operated on integers as opposed to floating point or colors or bytes, or right? So I wanted the integer version, okay, which is this guy there, okay? So that's a logic block, and I pipe into it two numbers. Those two numbers are either the same or they are not. If they are the same, what gets output by that block? It outputs false, okay? So if the number is different than 0, then true comes out. If it's the same as 0, then false goes out. This AND block fails, and nobody's won yet with that row. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so coming out of this, if I pipe out of all of this and I get a true, that means that somebody has won on the top row. Yes? Okay, if somebody's won on the top row, what should happen? Game's over, and yeah, okay? So when I get a true out of this, I'm going to set the winner to whatever value was being stored in those three entries, okay? Because remember, so my winner variable is going to be a 0 initially. Nobody's won yet. 1 if it's the first player who won, and 2 if it's the second. Yeah? Okay. So if the three entries that were the same in my array all were the value 2, then which player won? Player number 2. Okay, let me say it again, right? So how do I know if player 2 won along the top row? If those entries in the array are all 2s. 2, 2, 2. By definition, yeah. Okay. But, yeah, they would have all been 2s. Okay? And so if they're all 2s, what player number is the winner? Number 2. If it's 1, then what's the player number that won? Number 1. Right? So this is why I only have 8 of them and not 16, because I just took the number 2 or 1 and piped that into my winner variable. Okay? And thereby only having 8 cases rather than 16. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. And I'm lazy, so I definitely did not want to have to do this 16 times. Okay. So if there's a winner, set the winner variable to the value, and then come over here, and basically I just print the string that says player blank wins, okay, to the console. Okay, now in y'all's case, I'm going to have you guys do this as sort of an exercise. What would have been better? I just printed it at the console because that was quick and dirty. Yeah, do some widget stuff and make it like a cool UI.
Is the print string Unreal way of doing a console on it?
Yeah, exactly. There is.
That could be very helpful.
Well, and you'll notice that the print string thing, it's got that red or the yellow and black caution tape at the bottom. And it's a little hard to see, but it says development only. Okay, there should never be a print string, or almost never be a print string in a finished product. You only put it there for testing purposes because it's quick and dirty and you don't have to worry about how the widget looks. Okay, but for you guys, I'm going to make you do the widgets. Okay, because that's cool. Plus, the other benefit is that you can make a button in the widget that the player or one of the players has to click to reset the game. Okay, all right, so after that happens, somebody won, then I reset the game. I probably should have put a delay in here, but that's okay. I just left it. Okay. So I made an event, or sorry, a function to reset the game. Okay. Just so that we could replay it. Okay. But if all of that is false, okay, meaning that nobody won along the top row, what else do I have to check? I got to check all the other rows and columns and diagonals. Okay, so if nobody won on the first row, then I need to go down and do a whole bunch of other crap. Okay, and this is where it was copy-paste city, because how do I check if somebody won on the second row? It's the same exact thing with one minor detail. Which entries out of the array do I care about now? 3, 4, and 5. And for the third row, what is it? 6, 7, 8. Okay, and then for the first column, what is it? Now you have to think. Right, okay, so, well, 0, 3, yes, 0, 3, 6. Okay, you have to like use for the first column, not row, right? Yes? Okay, and then the diagonals, right, etc. Okay, so all of that stuff is the same. Okay, it's just I'm changing which number I'm looking at. And you'll notice that this, doesn't this remind you of guys of when we did this in MakeCode, when we had that giant set of logic blocks to check all the different cases? Okay, same idea. And they're just all, right, so the flow here is it goes to this one first, it checks the top row, then the second row, then the third row, then the first column, then the second column, then the third column, then the diagonals. Okay, and the instant it comes to a winning row or column, it no longer needs to check anything following, does it? Because you've already found somebody who won. Okay, so done. Right, and in all the cases, we set the winner to that variable. We print, we reset the game. Okay, so does that kind of make sense? Right, so that's why I've got all these white wires. In all 8 cases, I want to print who won. Yeah?
So is the way this set up now, it doesn't recognize the stalemate?
Yes, okay, good point. I have not programmed anything in here to recognize the stalemate state. It's almost as if I was deliberately leaving something as an exercise for the students. Okay. Yeah. Don't worry, I was going to assign that. You don't have to like beat them up after class. Okay. Okay, but yes, we have not taken into account stalemates. Okay. How did we take in or keep track of stalemates in when we did this in MakeCode? Yeah, okay. So we basically, at the end of the check win thing, said, hey, have all 9 things been clicked? Okay, so what would we need to add possibly to keep track of that?
You have to grab your is active variable.
You could grab the isActive variable from all 9 blocks. However, that would mean casting to all 9 blocks. Okay, what is another way? Okay, but how would you tell if all 9 blocks are filled? That's really the question, right?
By casting to the tile blocks?
Okay, do you want to cast all 9 different things? Yeah. Probably not. Okay, so what's a better way? Well, how about just have a counter that starts at 0, and each time you click something, you add 1 to the counter? Okay. Well, I'd probably put it in the tile because that's where we've already got all the clicky stuff. Okay, so each time you click, if the block is active, don't do anything because it's already active. If it's not active, in addition to all the other crap we did, just add 1 to your counter. Okay, and then at the very end of this thing, we could say, hey, is the counter's value equal to 8? Or 9 or whatever, right? Depends on where you start the counter. If so, that means all the blocks have been clicked and there's a stalemate. Otherwise, the game's not over yet. Okay? So, yeah, so y'all's 2 exercises, and don't worry, I will upload my project so that you guys don't have to start from scratch. Will be to modify it to take into account stalemates and also not have this console crap and do it with a widget instead. Okay, just for Gucci-ness. Okay, good? All right, so what's the last thing that I haven't told you guys about was how the game got reset. okay, to have it go. So how could I reset the game? I could just hit the stop button and hit play again, right? But I also could actually tell the game to reset itself, okay? Now, how do I want to do that? How do I take all these variables and set them back to their original values? Well, what are the original values for everybody before the game started? What should that array have been? All zeros. Okay, what should the active booleans for each tile be? 0. And the material color should all be set back to blue. Yeah? Okay, so I just need to tell all these variables to switch back to those values. Okay, so here's how I did that. I made an event called reset game. Okay, so let me go back to the event graph. Okay, so an event called reset game. What should I do? Well, I just put in a little string saying, hey, I'm resetting the game. I set winner to 0 because now the game's over and we're restarting. Okay, and then I need to do something for every block. There's 9 blocks, so I need to do something 9 times. What does each block need to do to reset? Oh, sorry, before the blocks. Before each individual tile. Sorry, that's next. What do I need to do to that array of 9 numbers? Set them all back to zeros. Okay? And so what I do is I take in the array, okay, and I say for each value in the array, set the value of item number whatever to 0. Okay? So this for each loop, what it does is it goes through, like let's say you have an array and it has 37 things in it. It's going to do that, whatever your loop body is, once for each of the items in that array. Okay? The items in your array don't have to be numbers. You can make an array of players, for example. Okay? Right, so like let's say in Fortnite, right, there's 100 players and I need to transport all of them to be in the bus. Well, I'm not going to individually say transport player 1, transport player 2, transport, right? I'm just going to say make an array of all players, transport each player. Do it 100 times, right? And bam, they're all in the bus. Okay? All right, so sets all the values to 0. What else do I need to do? The player turn, I need to set to be 0 because it's always the first player that gets to go first, by definition. Okay? Okay, and then this next part was a little tricky that what I had to do is I had to get actually, you know what? I didn't need this. I could have deleted this block. Okay, but what do I need to do? I need to tell each block to reset its color back to the blue material. Okay, so I've got that block there that says get all actors of class. Okay, so what is this going to do? It's going to produce an array, and inside this array are going to be what? Yeah, each individual tile. Okay, so it's going to be an array of 9 tiles inside of it. Okay? Good? And then what do I want to do for each tile? Change the material and so on. Okay, so what I did is for each thing in my array, I'm going to cast to that block and trigger a reset function inside the block. Okay, so this, by the way, is how many times have I technically cast to the block? There's 2 answers here. Either once, because there's one thing there, or 9 times, because what am I doing? I'm looping over it, right? So each time I do one of the instances of the loop body, I'm casting to that particular puzzle block and then telling it to reset. Okay, so I'm not telling all 9 of them to reset simultaneously. I'm telling the first one to reset, then the second one to reset, then the third one, and so on. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, all right, so this is an event inside each individual block. Okay, so then we need to go look at what that does. Okay, good? All right, so let me close out of here and go back to the puzzle block. Okay, so up here is where I put my reset block custom event. Okay, so this is, think of this as being a def. When you made functions in make code, they started with def. When you're defining something, think of that as almost like a def. Okay. All right. So what needed to happen? What needed to happen to each block? I needed to set its material back to the blue. Okay. I also needed to do what? Set it to be not active so that it's now clickable again. Okay. So the first thing I did was I set the isActive thing to false, meaning that it's clickable. Okay, then I set its materials to blue, and then this thing here, I just had it print to the console block number, whatever, has been reset. Okay, so that I could make sure that it was in fact going through and doing all of them. Okay, I just did that for testing. I could delete that now, though. Okay, so does that make sense? All right, so let's test our game and then see what happens. All right, so default state. What are the values for isActive for each of the 9 blocks? They're all false, 0. Okay. What is the array, the block vals array, right now? It's an array of 9 zeros. Okay. And is the check win function running, or has it been run yet? Why not? I haven't clicked. It only got triggered on a click. Okay, so if I hover over, it changes to white and then changes back. Okay, now the reason it did that is because there are 2 events being triggered: on mouse hover over and on mouse no longer hover over. If it's hovered over, it changes it to white. If it's not, it goes back to blue. Okay, so let me click one. And you'll notice that when the mouse is no longer, it doesn't change the yellow one back to white. Okay, because what is it checking for the color hover over bit? Is it active or not? Okay, if it's already active, that means somebody's clicked it. Do I need to change the color? No, it's not selectable. That's silly. Okay, so I clicked there. It's yellow. All right, what is the block vals array now? One followed by 8 zeros, because I clicked the top left block. Okay, the top left block, what is its isActive variable? It's true. What about all the other blocks? False. Okay, and what is now the value of player turn? Careful. It's true. Okay, because remember the player val, or the player turn, what kind of variable did I make that? Made it a Boolean, so it's only ever false or true, and I was thinking of false as being the first player and true as the second. Okay, good? Okay, now, did the check win function run? Okay. How do we know it ran? I mean, because we wrote the code, right? We know it did. But is there any way that you would know, unless you had seen the code, that that function had run? Not yet, right? Could I put something in there like a console message checking if a player won? Oh, yeah, I could have done that, right, to just tell us. And that's good for testing purposes, to put that sort of stuff in there, just to make sure you're not being a bonehead and that you forget something. Okay, but it ran exactly once. Okay? What about if I keep clicking this thing? Is it running anymore? Why not? Yeah, because what was the variable that I looked at before I did anything after the click happened? Is active. Is active was false meant that I had not been clicked and then I did stuff. If is active was true, did I do a damn thing? Nope. It is no longer necessary. Okay? All right, so now what should happen if I click another block? It should turn red, and the player turn is going to flip-flop. All right, so if I click red here, okay, and then let me put yellow here, and I'll put red there, and let's say yellow is being stupid today. Okay, so it says player 1 wins, okay, which it was yellow who, no, wait, I have that backwards. Red one, okay, so it should say player 2 won. Okay, so that means we need to go back in here and
So is red maybe the value then?
oh, I bet you I have them backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have them backwards. Okay, well, now you guys have something to fix. But, uh, no, it says player 2 in the other. I had them backwards, I think. That's my bad. Okay, what else is the problem? Yeah, okay, so I messed up the anti-diagonal. Okay, so which entries do I need to be checking out of my array for this one? 0, 1, 2, 4, and 6. Okay, so let's go in and make sure I didn't botch something. All right, so that was the very bottom for the anti-diagonal. 2, 4, and 6. Are they equal? Are they not 0? Well, that's weird. Set winner. Print string. That's interesting. Okay, so we don't have a reset. All right, let me put yellow there. Okay, why did that happen? Okay, check win function.
I think on the main diagonal one, it says 047 when it should say 04.
048.
Or 048, yeah.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, okay, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and then let's just make sure we're not being idiots for the off diagonal. Should be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay, all right, let's try it again. Okay, that worked. Okay, and I've got yellow and red backwards, so that's my bad. Okay, now the off diagonal. Yeah, okay, I think what happened was because this has to be false for the next thing to trigger, that if for some reason this was true, I'm not sure why that happened. That's kind of weird, but okay, it's fixed. Okay, so what's the only issue I have right now?
Player 2 is
Yeah, I've got the players backwards, okay? Which means I need to go back into the, well, let's just switch that by, let me compile and save. And then in the puzzle block, the materials, oops, if it's just the colors that are backwards, then all I need to do is switch this one to orange and this one to red. So just flop them. Okay, so first player is now red. Player 1. But player 2 got to go first. Okay, that's not right. Which means I bet you in my game mode, the player turn, let me start it as true. Player 1 won, okay. And then player 2 wins. Okay, so I just had it backwards. Okay, so that's fixed. Okay, but it works otherwise. So what's the exercise to the reader? Stalemate checking and widgetize it. Okay? And in fact, you could do something where when you load the game, it doesn't initially spawn all the blocks, but rather puts a menu up. Would you like to play? And then you click something and it hits true. Okay? So, I mean, you could make a fancy menu. This score thing, I can delete that, right? No longer relevant.
Did you make like a text that varies per player, like whoever's triggered?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this score thing, right? I deleted the score updating stuff from the template, but when you load the vanilla template for this, each time you click, it adds to the score, and then that score thing updates, right? Could you make that instead player 1's turn, player 2's turn, and have it flip back and forth? Yeah. Guess what? You guys better beat Tyler up after class.
Let's figure it out.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, it shouldn't be too hard, right? So make the widget for telling it who won, and have a button for resetting in the widget. Okay, that would trigger the reset. Okay, now that means you'd have to go into the code and you'd have to tell it, don't reset until that button got pressed, rather than it sort of automatically triggered in mine. Okay, so you will have to modify my code a little bit, just not tunsies. Okay, we could get rid of this puzzle template text. That's not necessary. Okay, and in fact, this guy here, let's go to Browse to Asset. Okay, this is actually part of the puzzle block grid. Okay, this score text, right, is a text component of the thing. Okay, and so in fact, let's look at the code. It would be in the event graph here. Okay, so that does the spawning, and here's the scoring stuff. Okay, add score, that never got triggered, but what is it doing? It's taking the value of the score, and then it's formatting this text. And you'll notice, you see how the score, you're piping in the value of a variable into a piece of text? Well, so what's the difference between score here and score in curly braces? One's a variable, and the other's just a bunch of letters, okay? So notice how I hover over it. It says, uses curly brace to denote format arguments. Argument types may be bytes, integers, floats, text, blah, 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 okay? So what that means is that you can have text being updated dynamically, and in your case, well, there's a couple ways you could do it, right? You could say player blank turn, okay, and then it would say player one's turn or whatever, okay? All right, so does this kind of make sense? All right, so I will zip this thing up and upload it so you guys can get to it, and that'll give you guys thing number one to work on for Tuesday. Okay, now, we got just a minute left. Did you guys also kind of look at some of the other templates that were available within the engine? So third person, first person, flying, vehicle, etc. Okay, what'd you notice about all of those? Did any of them sort of strike you as, hey, I think I'd like to make a game or something with this mode? Yeah?
What kind of game would you make with
Ah, okay, good question. Have you guys ever, well, I'll give you a good example. Have you played Breath of the Wild? Okay, well then forget you. So what kind of game mode? Well, what about if you had like did you ever play with one of those things as a kid that it was like a maze and there were holes in it and you had to like move the ball around? Okay, something like that. And I remember playing, I think it was called Marble Madness, or wasn't there a Nintendo game that was sort of like that?
Monkey ball is
Yeah.
monkey what I remember.
Okay, so something like that. Yeah, what else?
So this would not be feasible for like a project in this class, but if someone were to say to want to make some sort of GTA game where it's like
Open world?
open world, but you can also get in vehicles.
Ah,
So you
yeah.
can do in between templates.
No. What you would have is you would have the vehicle from the from one of them, and when you got in it, you would activate. You would change from one mode to another, but there would only be one. Like, it's hard to describe. Well, okay, it would be that would be a much more glorious instance of like a cutscene. Right. So to do a cutscene, right, you basically temporarily suspend the player's ability to move and you switch the camera to something else, right? You'd be kind of doing that when you, say, walked up to a vehicle and hit E or whatever, then it would put you in vehicle mode by setting the variable and disabling your regular controls and now switching over to the automotive controls. Okay. Now, that said, yeah, when you guys think about this, don't think that you can do something that big, right? Okay.
I was just looking at it and I was like, I wonder how it's actually done.
Well, in GTA's case, they probably, well, first off, they're not using Unreal, okay? They're using probably a bespoke engine that has been, that's sort of proprietary and in-house only. How we would do that on Unreal would be, well, something like that. But, yeah. What other game modes did you guys see that were of interest? Yeah.
I actually found a turn-based template on the marketplace.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Good point. That you are certainly not limited to the templates that are in the base mode. There's all kinds of crap in the marketplace. Okay, content and templates, and for that matter. Any other ideas?
I found something. I looked in the free for the month tab, and I found something called Hack and Slash GFX, and it was like all these like cool particle effects for like when you like strike an attack. So maybe you could make like a hack and slash game.
Okay. Now, did you guys ever look at the side scrollers? Okay. Now, the side scrollers by default were there's the 2D and the 3D version. Okay. And the difference was the 2D version was like MakeCode in the sense that if you want to animate something, you have to animate each frame of it. Okay. The 3D one is 3D stuff, but you're looking at it from a 2D perspective. So it does have depth, but it's not. It's still 3D objects. The 2D one, beware, because that would be a lot of art making. Now, some of you are good at making art. right? How, if you're feeling that much art. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So what we'll work on next week, and I'll send out the details and stuff on Canvas, is to start kind of thinking, prototyping, and ballparking, getting ideas for our projects, because we basically have about a month left, right? So it's time for us to kind of get to work. Yeah. Training wheels need to come off now. Okay. All right. So this has been fun. I will see you guys on Tuesday. I will send out instructions by Canvas after I finish the other class. Corey, hopefully everything was Gucci today. And I will see you guys on Tuesday. Yep, see you guys.
Spring break.